The microphone smelled of cheap whiskey and someone else's perfume. I closed my eyes, letting the dim spotlight warm my face as I wrapped my fingers around the metal stand. This was my moment. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of escape from the life that waited for me outside those doors. "This one's for the dreamers," I whispered, my voice catching slightly in the silence of the Cardinal. A place too elegant for someone like me. The first notes from the piano washed over me like a gentle wave, and I let my voice rise to meet them. Singing had always been my salvation, even when everything else fell apart, even when Michael's father disappeared with our savings, even when the rent came due and the refrigerator stood empty, even when my 5-year-old son asked why we couldn't turn the heat up in winter. The crowd was the usual Thursday night mix. Businessmen loosening their ties after long days, couples on dates they wouldn't remember in a week, and the regulars who came for the overpriced drinks and stayed for whatever entertainment might distract them from their lives. I'd been singing at the Cardinal for 6 months now, ever since Mrs. Sullivan from apartment 4B agreed to watch Michael on weeknights for a fraction of what I earned here. As I moved into the chorus, I noticed a shift in the air. The hairs on my arms stood up despite the warmth of the spotlight. Someone was watching me, not in the casual way of the typical patron, but with an intensity that felt almost physical. My eyes scanned the room without breaking the melody, searching for the source of that heavy gaze. That's when I saw him. He sat alone at a corner table half shrouded in shadow, the crystal tumbler of amber liquid before him untouched. Even in the dimness, his presence commanded the space around him. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, tailored to broad shoulders, and a frame that suggested both power and precision. Dark hair swept back from a face carved with sharp angles and a jawline that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that held me, impossibly dark, unblinking, and fixed solely on me. I faltered on a note, just slightly, enough that probably only I noticed. But the corner of his mouth twitched in response, a ghost of a smile that never fully formed. Throughout the remainder of my set, I felt those eyes on me. I sang to the crowd, moved across the small stage as I always did, but every motion felt performed for him alone. When I finally finished to scattered applause, I dipped my head in a modest bow and retreated to the small alcove behind the stage that served as our break room. "You've got an admirer out there," said Marco, the pianist, as he followed me back. He was in his 60s, with gentle hands and a voice weathered by years of cigarettes and late nights. "Table 7. Been coming in for the past week, always when you're on. Never when Lizzie sings." "What?" I wiped the sheen of perspiration from my forehead with a tissue. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Marco shrugged, reaching for his ever-present thermos of coffee. "Figured you'd noticed. Man like that is hard to miss." "Who is he?" I asked, stealing another glance through the curtain. "Nobody knows his name. Staff calls him Mr. 7 since that's his table. Always reserved, even when the place is empty. Tony says he's somebody important, maybe politics or old money. Tips like a dream." Marco took a sip from his thermos. "Be careful though, Ellie. Men like that, they're used to getting what they catch their eye." I smoothed down my simple black dress, suddenly aware of how the fabric had faded from too many washes, how the hemline had been repaired twice already. "Well, he's out of luck then. I'm not for sale." Marco gave me a sad smile. "Everything's for sale at the right price, kid. That's the first rule of places like this." When I returned for my second set an hour later, he was still there, still watching, still untouching that same drink. Only now there was a small box on the table beside it, wrapped in deep blue paper and tied with a silver ribbon. My second set went smoother than the first. I chose slower songs, more intimate ones that allowed my voice to caress each note. I didn't look at him directly, but I felt him there, his attention unwavering. When I finished and the applause died down, Tony, the bar manager, approached the stage and handed me a folded note. "From table 7, he said with a wink before walking away. The paper was thick, expensive. The handwriting inside, elegant and precise. "Your voice deserves better than this place. The gift is merely an appreciation, no strings attached." I crumpled the note in my fist and glanced over at table 7, but it was empty. Both the man and the blue box were gone. "He left this for you at the bar," said Diane, one of the waitresses, appearing beside me with the blue box. "Said to make sure you got it." "I don't want it," I said, even as my fingers betrayed me by reaching for it. "Honey, if you don't take it, I will." Diane laughed. "I've served him 3 times now. Never says more than please and thank you, but tips $100 every time. Whatever's in that box is probably worth more than my car." I took the box home with me that night, telling myself I would throw it away. Instead, it sat on my kitchen counter while I paid Mrs. Sullivan, checked on my sleeping son, and changed out of my performance clothes into a worn t-shirt and sweatpants. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom that Michael used, while I slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room. The kitchen was barely large enough for a miniature refrigerator and a 2-burner stove, but I'd made it as homey as I could with thrift store finds and the colorful drawings Michael brought home from kindergarten. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at our wobbly kitchen table, staring at the blue box. Finally, with trembling fingers, I pulled at the silver ribbon. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, lay a vintage silver microphone pendant on a delicate chain. It was beautiful, tasteful, and somehow deeply personal in a way that made my chest tighten. How had he known? How had this stranger selected something that spoke so directly to my passion? I closed the box and pushed it away. No matter how beautiful, gifts from strange men came with expectations I couldn't afford. The next day passed in its usual blur of dropping Michael at school, working my day job as a receptionist at a dental clinic, picking Michael up, making dinner, helping with his simple kindergarten homework, bath time, bedtime stories, and finally, preparing for another night at the Cardinal. "Mommy, why do you have to go?" Michael asked as I tucked him in, his small hand holding mine with surprising strength. His eyes, so like his father's, were wide with the fear of separation that had haunted him since James walked out on us. "Just for a few hours, sweetheart," I said, brushing his dark curls from his forehead. "Mrs. Sullivan will be right here if you need anything, and I'll be back before you wake up, I promise." But why? How could I explain to a 5-year-old that his mother's respectable day job barely covered rent, that singing in a bar at night was what put food on our table and kept the electricity on, that every hour I spent away from him carved a hole in my heart, but was necessary for our survival? "Because sometimes mommies have to work at night too," I said instead, placing a kiss on his forehead. "But I'm always thinking about you, even when I'm singing." His small face scrunched in thought. "Do you sing about me?" I smiled. "Every song is about you, baby. Every single one." That seemed to satisfy him, and he snuggled deeper into his blankets. I stayed until his breathing evened out, then quietly left the room, the familiar guilt settling over my shoulders like a heavy cloak. When I arrived at the Cardinal that night, Tony intercepted me before I could reach the dressing room. "Change of plans tonight, Ellie," he said, his face unusually serious. "You're singing in the Crimson Room." I blinked at him in confusion. The Crimson Room was the private lounge upstairs, reserved for VIPs and private parties. I'd never been asked to perform there. "Why?" "I'm supposed to be on the main floor tonight. Special request." Tony shuffled uncomfortably. "Double your usual pay, plus tips." "Who requested me?" Tony's eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. "Look, it's just singing, same as down here. Marco will accompany you. 1 hour set, that's it." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "It's him, isn't it? Table 7. Tony sighed. "His name is Alexander Vronsky. He owns this place, Ellie, and about a dozen other businesses in the city." The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in the city knew the Vronsky family, or at least knew of them. Old money, vast influence, and whispers of connections that extended beyond legitimate business. The kind of people who made problems disappear. "I thought Maurice owned the Cardinal," I said weakly. "Maurice is the manager on paper. Mr. Vronsky prefers to remain anonymous in his investments." I thought of the blue box sitting untouched on my dresser at home, of Michael sleeping peacefully under Mrs. Sullivan's watch, of the past due electric bill hidden in my purse. "Double pay?" I asked. Tony nodded. "Cash. Tonight." I followed him upstairs to the Crimson Room. my heart hammering against my ribs. The space was intimate and luxurious, with deep red walls, leather seating, and soft lighting that created pools of warmth throughout the room. A small stage was set up in one corner, where Marco already waited at a gleaming black piano. The room was empty save for one occupant. Alexander Vronsky stood by the window, gazing out at the city below. He turned as we entered, and I got my first clear view of him. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with features that spoke of Eastern European ancestry. His eyes were indeed dark, not brown, but a deep, penetrating blue that appeared black in dim light. A thin scar traced the line of his left jaw, the only flaw in an otherwise perfect face. He wore another impeccable suit, this one navy, with a white shirt open at the collar. No tie. No ostentatious jewelry or displays of wealth. He didn't need them. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame. "Ms. Eleanor Hayes," Tony said formally. "Mr. Vronsky." Alexander's eyes never left mine as he nodded almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Tony. That will be all." Tony disappeared, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison lock in the sudden silence. "You didn't wear it," Alexander said, his voice low and smooth with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. He nodded toward my neck, where the silver microphone pendant was conspicuously absent. "I don't accept gifts from strangers," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. A smile touched his lips, genuine amusement warming his severe features. "Yet you accepted this engagement." "That's business. I'm being paid for a service." "Singing," he clarified. "Yes, singing." He gestured toward the stage. "Then please don't let me keep you from your business." I moved to the stage on legs that felt disconnected from my body, exchanging a quick glance with Marco, who gave me a reassuring nod. As I took my place at the microphone, Alexander settled into a leather armchair positioned directly before the stage, close enough that I could see the fine stitching on his suit jacket, smell the subtle cologne that clung to him. Something woodsy and exclusive. "Any requests, Mr. Vronsky?" I asked, hating the slight tremble that had crept into my voice. "Whatever moves you, Ms. Hayes." He leaned back, one ankle resting casually on the opposite knee. "I'm here for authenticity, not performance." I nodded to Marco, who began a gentle introduction to La Vie en Rose, a song I rarely performed because it exposed too much of me, demanded too much vulnerability. But something about this bizarre situation, this dangerous man watching me with those midnight eyes, made me reckless. I sang as I never had before, my voice filling the intimate space, bouncing off the crimson walls, wrapping around us both like silk. I closed my eyes for most of it, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. When the final note faded and I opened my eyes again, I found him leaning forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped before him. Something like wonder softened his expression. For an hour, I sang to him alone. Songs of love and loss, of hope and despair. When Marco played the final chord of our set, silence descended like a heavy curtain. Alexander stood and approached the stage, stopping at its edge. Up close, I could see that his eyes weren't solid blue, but ringed with darker indigo around the irises. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, which he placed on the piano. "You've given me an exceptional evening, Ms. Hayes," he said quietly. "I hope you'll accept this as an expression of my appreciation. Mr. Vronsky." "Alexander," he corrected. "And you're wondering why you're here, why I've been watching you." I swallowed hard. The thought crossed my mind. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Your voice called to me the moment I heard it. I merely answered. He turned to leave, then paused. The pendant. It belonged to my mother. She was a singer too before she married my father. I thought it fitting. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving behind only the envelope and the lingering scent of his cologne. Marco whistled low. Well, that was intense. He picked up the envelope and handed it to me. Better count it. Men like that, their generosity usually comes with expectations. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. $5,000. More money than I made in 2 months at both my jobs combined. Tucked among the bills was another note in that elegant handwriting. For your son's education, no strings attached. My blood ran cold. How did he know about Michael? I barely slept that night, Alexander Vronsky's words echoing in my mind. For your son's education, no strings attached. How did he know about Michael? What else did he know about us? The money sat untouched on my nightstand, both tempting and terrifying. Dawn broke through the thin curtains of our apartment as I made Michael's lunch. Peanut butter and jelly on the last slices of bread. We needed groceries desperately. That envelope could solve so many immediate problems. Mommy, your eyes are all puffy, Michael observed as he munched on his cereal. His own eyes were bright, innocent, unaware of our precarious financial situation. I forced a smile. Just tired, sweetie. Drink your milk. After dropping Michael at school, I stopped at the bank and deposited half the money into a savings account I labeled Michael's College Fund. The rest I kept in cash, hidden in the back of my dresser drawer. It felt like a compromise with my conscience. That afternoon, when I arrived at the dental office, my boss, Dr. Mercer, was waiting for me with a strange expression. Eleanor, could I see you in my office? His voice was formal, nothing like his usual friendly tone. My stomach dropped. I followed him into his small office, clutching my purse strap like a lifeline. I received a call this morning, he began, not quite meeting my eyes. From someone who claimed to be a business associate of yours. I frowned. A business associate? He mentioned your evening performances. Dr. Mercer's face flushed. Eleanor, you never disclosed this other employment when we hired you. It's just singing, I said, my voice small. A few nights a week at a lounge. It doesn't interfere with my work here. The Cardinal isn't just a lounge, he said, finally looking at me. I've heard things about its ownership. Ice flooded my veins. What exactly did this caller say? That you were a valuable talent who deserved a more flexible schedule. Dr. Mercer pushed his glasses up nervously. He suggested I adjust your hours to accommodate your evening performances, or he would be disappointed. Alexander Vronsky. It had to be. I'm sorry, I said, anger building beneath my fear. I never asked anyone to call you. Nevertheless, Dr. Mercer said, sliding a paper across his desk. I've revised your schedule. You'll work 9 to 3 now, Monday through Thursday. Same pay. I stared at him. That's 30 hours instead of 40. Same pay? He nodded stiffly. I was strongly encouraged to be accommodating. I should have been grateful. More time with Michael, no reduction in pay. But all I felt was violated. This man, this stranger, was rearranging my life without permission, inserting himself into my affairs with the casual entitlement of someone used to controlling everything around him. That night at the Cardinal, I arrived early, determined to confront Alexander Vronsky. But Tony informed me that I'd been moved to the Crimson Room again. Is he here? I demanded. Not yet, Tony said, avoiding my eyes. But he will be. Listen, Ellie. No, you listen, I hissed, keeping my voice low as other staff members passed by. I don't know what game he's playing, but I want no part of it. He called my day job, Tony. He threatened my boss. Tony paled. He didn't mention that to me. Well, he didn't ask my permission either. Tell him I'm not singing in his private room tonight. I'll be on the main floor as scheduled. I turned to walk away, but Tony grabbed my arm. Ellie, please, don't make this difficult. Mr. Vronsky isn't someone you can just refuse. Something in his tone made me pause. What are you not telling me, Tony? He released my arm and glanced around nervously. The Cardinal isn't his only business. Some of his other ventures aren't so legitimate. He's not just rich, he's connected. Understand? I understood perfectly. Alexander Vronsky wasn't merely wealthy. He was dangerous. Fine, I conceded, but I'm talking to him. Tonight. The Crimson Room was different this time. A small table had been set with fine china and crystal glasses. Candles flickered in silver holders. It looked like a date setting, and my anger flared hotter. I was studying the sheet music Marco had left on the piano when the door opened. Alexander entered, followed by a stone-faced man in a dark suit who positioned himself discreetly by the door after scanning the room. A bodyguard. Alexander's eyes found me immediately. He wore a charcoal gray suit tonight, with a deep burgundy tie that matched the room's walls. He looked like he owned the place, which, of course, he did. "Ms. Hayes?" He greeted me, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "You look lovely tonight." I was wearing the same black dress I always wore, the one with the mended hem. His compliment felt like mockery. "Why did you call my employer?" I asked without preamble. If he was surprised by my directness, he didn't show it. "You work too hard, split between 2 demanding jobs, raising a child alone. I merely facilitated a more manageable schedule." "It wasn't your place to facilitate anything in my life. You don't know me." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "I know more than you might think, Eleanor Hayes. Née Wilson. 28 years old. Graduated with honors in music education from State University. Married James Hayes at 22. Gave birth to Michael James Hayes a year later. Abandoned by your husband when your son was 2. He emptied your bank accounts before disappearing to Miami with his mistress." Each word fell like a stone in the silent room. I felt the blood drain from my face. "How? Knowledge is a commodity I trade in," he said simply. "I was curious about the woman with the voice that haunted me, so I learned about her. That's stalking," I whispered. "That's interest," he corrected. "If I wanted to stalk you, Eleanor, you would never see me coming." The casual threat in his words made me shiver. "What do you want from me?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Initially, to hear you sing in a setting worthy of your talent. Now?" His gaze swept over me, not leering but assessing. "I find myself wanting to know the woman behind the voice." "I'm not available to be known," I said firmly. "I have a son to raise, 2 jobs, no time for whatever this is." "A convenient schedule now," he reminded me. "And singing for me pays considerably more than singing for the general public." I thought of the $5,000, half already deposited in Michael's college fund. I thought of our empty refrigerator, Michael's too small winter coat, the medications he needed for his asthma. 1 hour, I conceded. "I sing for 1 hour, you pay me as agreed, and then I go home to my son." Something like disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "As you wish." I moved to the stage area, but he stopped me with a raised hand. "Actually, I hoped we might dine first. I had a meal prepared." "I'm here to sing, Mr. Vronsky." "Alexander," he corrected again. "And you need to eat, Eleanor. I doubt you had time between jobs and your son's school." He was right, irritatingly so. I'd had nothing since a stale muffin at the dental office that morning. "Fine," I agreed reluctantly. "A quick meal." He pulled out my chair with old-world courtesy, then seated himself across from me. The bodyguard opened a side door, and a waiter appeared with covered dishes. The meal was exquisite: tender steak, roasted vegetables, freshly baked bread. Simple but perfectly prepared. "You don't wear your wedding ring," Alexander observed as we ate. I instinctively touched my bare finger. It wasn't worth keeping. "The marriage or the ring?" "Both," I admitted. "The ring was pawned to pay rent after James left." Alexander's expression darkened. "Your husband has much to answer for." "Ex-husband," I corrected, "and he's not worth discussing. Yet his actions shaped your current circumstances." I put down my fork, appetite fading. "Why are you so interested in my circumstances, Alexander? What do you really want?" He considered me for a long moment, those midnight blue eyes unreadable. "I want what most men want, Eleanor. Beauty, truth, connection. But I've found these things exceedingly rare in my world, and you think you'll find them with a struggling single mother who sings in your bar." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I think there's more honesty in your voice than in all the boardrooms and backroom deals I navigate daily." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it's not." After dinner, I sang for him as agreed. He watched with that same intense focus, never taking his eyes from me. When the hour ended, he approached the piano where Marco sat. "Would you give us a moment, please?" he asked Marco, who glanced at me uncertainly. "It's okay," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. When we were alone, Alexander removed another envelope from his jacket. "Your payment As agreed. I took it wordlessly, not bothering to count it this time. I'd like to make this arrangement permanent, he said. Exclusive performances, twice weekly. In return, I'll triple your current earnings from the Cardinal. The offer was too generous, which made me more suspicious. Why? Because talent should be rewarded, he said simply. And because I enjoy your company, Eleanor. This isn't company, I replied. This is a transaction. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Is that all you think you're worth? A transaction? It's all I can afford to be. I have responsibilities. To your son. He nodded. I respect that. My offer stands, with no expectations beyond your singing. Think about it. Before I could respond, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, the silver microphone pendant. He held it out to me. It was my mother's, as I said. She would have wanted another singer to have it. Whether you accept my offer or not, I hope you'll take this. No strings attached. I hesitated, then slowly reached for it. The silver was cool against my palm, heavier than it looked. Thank you, I said quietly. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. One more thing, Eleanor. James Hayes returned to the city yesterday. He's staying at the Westbridge Hotel downtown. I froze, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. How do you know that? I make it my business to know things that might affect my interests. His voice was casual, but his eyes were watchful. Just information. What you do with it is your choice. I fled the Crimson Room, clutching both the envelope and the pendant, feeling like I'd escaped something both dangerous and magnetic. But Alexander Vronsky's final words followed me home, echoing in my mind as I relieved Mrs. Sullivan and checked on my sleeping son. James was back in the city after 3 years of silence, of struggling alone, of explaining to Michael why Daddy didn't call on birthdays or Christmas. Why now? What could he possibly want? And how had Alexander Vronsky known it would matter to me? The next morning, I found myself standing across the street from the Westbridge Hotel, my heart pounding against my ribs. Michael was safely at school, and I'd called in sick to Dr. Mercer's office. I hadn't planned to come here, had told myself I wouldn't give James the satisfaction. Yet here I was, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The Westbridge was expensive, far beyond what James could afford on his teaching salary, unless things had changed dramatically in the past 3 years, unless the woman he'd left us for had money. I crossed the street on leaden legs and entered the marble-floored lobby. At the reception desk, I hesitated. "Can I help you, ma'am?" asked the young man behind the counter. "I'm looking for James Hayes," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "He's a guest here." The clerk tapped at his computer. "Yes, Mr. Hayes is in room 714. Would you like me to call up for you?" "No," I said quickly. "Thank you." The elevator ride to the 7th floor gave me too much time to think. What was I doing here? What did I hope to accomplish by confronting the man who had destroyed our family, who had left his 2-year-old son without a backward glance? Closure? Justice? Or was I simply curious to see if he was as handsome as I remembered, if he still had the power to charm with just a smile? I found room 714 and raised my hand to knock, then froze. From inside came a child's laugh, high and clear and achingly familiar. Michael was in school. This wasn't his laugh. Before I could process this, the door swung open, and there stood James, tanned and fit, his dark hair shorter than he'd worn it during our marriage, but his green eyes just as vibrant. He stared at me in shock. "Ellie?" Behind him, a little girl of about 3 peeked around his legs. She had his eyes, his dimpled smile. My chest constricted painfully. "You have a daughter," I whispered. James's face paled. "Ellie, I can explain." "Daddy, who's that?" The little girl tugged at his pants leg. "A friend of Daddy's, sweetheart," he replied, not taking his eyes off me. "Go tell Mommy we need a minute, okay?" The child disappeared into the room, and James stepped into the hallway, pulling the door almost closed behind him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low. "How did you find me? Does it matter?" My shock was hardening into something colder, sharper. "You have another child." He had the decency to look ashamed. It's not what you think. Really? Because I think you left your wife and 2-year-old son, emptied our bank accounts, and started a new family. What part did I misunderstand? Lower your voice, he hissed, glancing nervously at the door. Sophia doesn't know about before. Sophia, your new wife doesn't know you already had a family? The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. What did you tell her, James? That you sprang fully formed into her life without a past? He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that once I'd found endearing. Now it made me want to scream. It was easier this way, he said. A clean break. A clean break, I repeated. There was nothing clean about how you broke us, James. Nothing clean about how I had to explain to Michael why his father disappeared. Nothing clean about working 2 jobs to keep us afloat after you took everything. I was suffocating, Ellie, he said, his voice taking on the self-pitying tone I now recognized as manipulation. The responsibility, the constant worry about money, your obsession with music. Don't you dare, I cut him off. Don't you dare make this my fault. The door opened wider, and a woman appeared. Blonde, slim, expensively dressed. She looked between us with confusion. James? What's going on? I saw the moment realization dawned in her eyes as she took in my face, so similar in structure to the little girl's. You're his ex, she said flatly. Sophia, James began. You told me you'd never been married, she said to James, her voice rising. You told me Lily was your first child. I can explain, he said again, the same empty words he'd offered me moments before. I backed away, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. I'm sorry, I said to Sophia, meaning it. I didn't come to cause trouble. Why did you come? She asked, eyes narrowed with suspicion. I looked at James, this stranger who had once been the center of my world. I honestly don't know anymore. I fled back to the elevator, James calling after me but not following. Outside the hotel, I gulped fresh air, trying to steady myself. The betrayal I'd thought long scabbed over was suddenly fresh again, but different this time. James hadn't just abandoned us. He'd erased us, created a new life where we never existed. And he had another child, a daughter who would never know she had a half-brother. Michael had a sister he would never meet. The unfairness of it burned through me like acid. I walked blindly, no destination in mind, just needing to move, to outpace the rage and grief threatening to overwhelm me. Eventually, I found myself in a small park, sitting on a bench as afternoon shadows lengthened. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Dr. Mercer's office and a text from Mrs. Sullivan reminding me she had plans that evening and couldn't watch Michael. I'd have to call Tony, tell him I couldn't sing tonight. The thought of facing the cardinal, of potentially seeing Alexander Vronsky after he'd set this whole disaster in motion with his information, made my stomach clench. As if conjured by my thoughts, a black Bentley pulled up to the curb beside the park. The back door opened, and Alexander Vronsky emerged, immaculate in a light gray suit despite the late hour. His bodyguard appeared from the front passenger seat, but remained by the car as Alexander approached my bench. Are you following me? I demanded, too emotionally exhausted for politeness. Yes, he admitted without shame. I was concerned when you didn't arrive for your shift. I called Tony. Family emergency. Alexander sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. You saw him, he stated, rather than asked. I laughed bitterly. Yes, I saw him, his new wife, and their daughter. The family he replaced us with. Alexander was silent for a moment. I apologize. I thought you should know he had returned, but I didn't anticipate this outcome. Didn't you? I turned to face him. What did you think would happen when you dangled that information in front of me? Did you think I'd be grateful for the chance to confront the man who abandoned us? Or did you just want to watch what happened? His eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not in the habit of toying with people, Eleanor. No? Then why tell me at all? Why dig into my past, rearrange my work schedule, offer me money that comes with invisible strings? What do you want from me? He seemed to consider his words carefully. When I first heard you sing, I recognized something in your voice. A particular kind of pain transformed into beauty. resonated with me. I wanted to understand its source, so I'm a curiosity to you? A psychological puzzle? You're a remarkable woman, he replied simply. One who deserved to know that the man who betrayed her was nearby, potentially disrupting your life again. And you just happened to know where he was staying, who he was with. As I said, information is a commodity I trade in. I shook my head, too tired to untangle his motives. I need to pick up my son from school. My driver can take you, he offered, gesturing to the Bentley. No, thank you. I prefer the bus. Alexander's jaw tightened. It's going to rain. Let me at least ensure you and your son don't get soaked. As if on cue, the first heavy drops began to fall. I glanced at my watch. If I waited for the bus, I'd be late picking up Michael. Fine, I conceded. But just to the school and then home. The interior of the Bentley was as luxurious as I'd imagined. All soft leather and polished wood. Alexander sat opposite me, giving me space. His bodyguard driver navigated the city streets with smooth efficiency. You're wearing it, Alexander observed, nodding toward my neck. My hand went to the silver microphone pendant I'd put on that morning without conscious thought. It seemed wrong to waste it in a drawer, I said defensively. He smiled slightly. It suits you. We rode in silence until the car pulled up outside Michael's school. Children were already streaming out the front doors, teachers shepherding them to waiting parents. Wait here, please, I said, not wanting Alexander to see Michael, to have any further connection to my son's life. But as I exited the car, Michael came bounding down the steps, his Spider-Man backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. He spotted me and raced over, then stopped abruptly, eyes widening at the sight of the Bentley. Wow, is that your car, Mommy? No, sweetheart, it belongs to... I hesitated. A friend is giving us a ride home. Michael peered past me into the car's open door, where Alexander was now visible. To my surprise, Alexander slid across the seat and emerged from the car, standing beside me. He was tall, his presence commanding even in the casual chaos of elementary school dismissal. Hello, Michael, he said, crouching down to my son's eye level. I'm Alexander, a friend of your mother's. It's a pleasure to meet you. Michael studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood. Your car is awesome. Is it bulletproof like in the movies? Alexander's mouth twitched with amusement. As a matter of fact, it is. Cool, Michael breathed, then looked up at me. Can I ride in the bulletproof car, Mom? Please? I sighed, seeing no graceful way to refuse with Michael so obviously enchanted. Yes, but straight home, remember? The rain was falling steadily now. Alexander opened an umbrella I hadn't noticed him carrying and held it over Michael and me as we returned to the car. Inside, Michael bounced excitedly on the leather seat, firing questions at Alexander about the car's features, which he answered with surprising patience. Are you rich? Michael asked finally, with the directness only a child could get away with. Michael, I admonished. That's not polite. It's all right, Alexander said. Yes, Michael, I am rich, but I wasn't always. Really? Michael leaned forward. Were you poor like us? My cheeks burned with embarrassment. But Alexander didn't seem offended. Poorer, he said seriously. When I was your age, my family had just come to this country. We lived in a single room, all 5 of us. What happened? Michael asked, entranced. My father worked very hard. And when I grew up, I worked harder. That's the secret, you see. Hard work and seizing opportunities when they appear. Michael nodded solemnly, absorbing this wisdom. My mom works really hard, he informed Alexander. She has 2 jobs, and she still reads me a story every night. Alexander's eyes met mine, something like respect in their depths. Your mother is an extraordinary woman, he agreed. When we reached our apartment building, the rain had turned into a downpour. Alexander insisted on accompanying us to the door, sheltering us beneath his umbrella. The building's dingy hallway and our apartment's shabby door seemed even more depressing in contrast to his elegant presence. Thank you for the ride, I said formally as I unlocked our door. It was my pleasure, he replied, then looked down at Michael. It was an honor meeting you, young man. Michael beamed up at him. Can we ride in your car again sometime? Before I could intervene, Alexander handed Michael a business card. With your mother's permission, perhaps you both could join me for dinner this weekend. My initial impulse was to refuse, but the hope in Michael's eyes stopped me. When was the last time he'd had any excitement in his life? Any break from our grinding routine of school, babysitters, and my perpetual absence? We'll think about it, I said carefully. Alexander nodded, accepting the non-commitment. The offer stands. Good evening, Eleanor. Michael. As he walked away, Michael turned the business card over in his small hands. I like him, Mom. He doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby. He's just being polite, sweetheart, I said, ushering him inside. But even as I spoke, I wondered if that was true, or if Alexander Vronsky's interest in us was something more complicated, more dangerous than mere politeness. That night, after Michael was asleep, I sat at our small kitchen table staring at Alexander's business card. It was simple but elegant, heavy cream stock with his name and phone number embossed in deep navy. No company name, no title, no email. A man who didn't need to advertise who he was or what he did. I should throw it away. Cut all ties with this mysterious, dangerous man who had inserted himself into our lives. But something stopped me. The memory of Michael's delighted face in the Bentley, the weight of unpaid bills in my purse, the pendant against my throat that I couldn't seem to take off. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Everything okay? Boss was asking about you. I typed back, fine, family matter. I'll be in tomorrow night. Tony's response was immediate. Crimson room again. 8 p.m. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. Alexander Vronsky was not a man who took no for an answer. The question was, did I want to say no? The encounter with James had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Seeing him with his new family, knowing he'd erased us so completely, it reopened wounds I thought had healed. But it also freed something inside me. The last lingering hope that someday he'd return, that someday Michael would have his father back, was finally dead. We were on our own, and I needed to build a life for us that didn't include waiting for a man who was never coming back. But was Alexander Vronsky the answer? Or just another kind of danger? The next evening, I arrived at the Cardinal on time, my black dress freshly washed, the silver microphone pendant cool against my skin. Tony escorted me directly to the Crimson Room, where Marco waited at the piano. There was no dinner setting tonight, no sign of Alexander. He's running late, Tony explained. Ask that you start without him. He'll join when he can. I sang to an empty room for almost an hour, finding it strangely liberating. Without Alexander's intense gaze, I could lose myself completely in the music, let it wash through me and out into the world without filter or self-consciousness. When the door finally opened, I was deep in a melancholy rendition of Autumn Leaves, my eyes closed, my body swaying slightly to Marco's gentle accompaniment. I finished the song before opening my eyes. Alexander stood just inside the doorway, still in an overcoat, his hair slightly damp from rain. Behind him was his ever-present bodyguard, and beside him, to my surprise, a distinguished older man with silver hair and a cane. Don't stop on our account, the older man said, his voice accented like Alexander's but more pronounced. It was magnificent. Alexander moved forward, helping the older man to a seat. Eleanor, may I present my father, Victor Vronsky. Father, this is Eleanor Hayes. Victor Vronsky studied me with eyes the same midnight blue as his son's, set in a face mapped with experience. So you are the nightingale my son has been so secretive about. Now I understand why. I glanced at Alexander, who looked uncharacteristically uncomfortable. My father insisted on meeting you after I mentioned your talent. He explained. You honor us, Victor said, inclining his head. Please. Another song. I looked to Alexander, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I turned to Marco and whispered a song request, then faced the two men, so alike in bearing, in the aura of quiet authority that surrounded them. I sang La Vie en Rose again, the song I'd first performed for Alexander, watching as Victor closed his eyes, a small smile playing on his lips. When I finished, he applauded with genuine enthusiasm. You remind me of my Natalia, he said, a shadow passing over his face. She sang with such emotion, too. No training, just pure feeling. Your wife? I asked, stepping down from the small stage. Yes, Victor nodded. Alexander's mother. She passed many years ago, but her voice, I still hear it sometimes. Alexander placed a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that humanized him in a way I hadn't expected. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the devoted son beneath the powerful businessman. Eleanor has a son, Alexander told his father, Michael, 5 years old and already quite the conversationalist. Victor's eyes brightened. A boy. You must bring him to Sunday dinner. My cook makes pierogi that children cannot resist. Oh, I couldn't, I began. Nonsense. Victor waved away my protest. Family dinner is sacred. Alexander will arrange it. I caught Alexander's eye, silently questioning what exactly was happening. He gave me a look that suggested we would discuss it later. Now, I have taken enough of your time, Victor said, struggling slightly to stand. Alexander immediately moved to assist him. Age, Victor sighed. It comes for us all eventually. Even my stubborn son here. Father, Alexander said with fond exasperation, you should be home resting, not out in this weather. I am not dead yet, Victor retorted, and I wanted to meet the woman whose voice has my son distracted from business for the first time in 20 years. With that parting shot, he allowed Alexander to escort him to the door, where the bodyguard waited. Alexander spoke quietly to him, then returned to the room while the other two departed. I apologize for the interruption, he said. My father can be insistent. He seems lovely, I said honestly. But dinner? Alexander, I don't know what's happening here. Between us. He approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. What would you like to be happening, Eleanor? I don't know, I admitted. You've invaded my life in ways both helpful and unsettling. You know so much about me, while I know almost nothing about you. What would you like to know? He asked, removing his overcoat and draping it over a chair. The truth. About who you are, what you do, why you're so interested in me and my son. Alexander was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the small table in the corner. Shall we sit? I followed him to the table, perching nervously on the edge of my chair. He sat opposite me, his posture relaxed, but his eyes watchful. My family came to this country when I was 6, he began. We had nothing, political refugees from the Soviet collapse. My father had been a professor of literature, my mother a music teacher. Here, they became janitors, dishwashers, whatever work they could find. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. The neighborhood we settled in was controlled by the Bratva, Russian mafia. They protected immigrant families like ours, for a price. When my parents couldn't pay, they came for me instead. I was 12. My breath caught. What do you mean, came for you? They offered my father a choice, his son's service to the organization, or his daughter's virtue. My sister was 9. Alexander's voice was matter-of-fact, but I saw the old rage burning in his eyes. My father chose to sacrifice me. Oh God, I whispered, what happened? I became a runner for them, delivering packages, messages. As I grew older, the tasks became more complicated. By 16, I was collecting debts. By 20, I had my own territory. His mouth twisted in a cold smile. I was good at it. The scared immigrant boy learned quickly how power works in this country. And now? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Now I own legitimate businesses across the city. The Cardinal, hotels, import-export companies. But yes, Eleanor, some of my interests still lie in the shadows. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. I swallowed hard. Are you telling me you're in the mafia? I'm telling you I built an empire from nothing, by whatever means necessary. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. But I'm also telling you that I've spent the past decade legitimizing my operations, creating a legacy my father can be proud of, one that doesn't require 12-year-old boys to become criminals to protect their families. Part of me wanted to flee, to take Michael and run as far from this man as possible. But another part recognized the brutal honesty in his confession. Why tell me this? I asked. Aren't you afraid I could go to the police? He smiled slightly. With what evidence? Besides, I think you understand survival, Eleanor. The lengths one goes to for family. I thought of the double shifts, the exhaustion, the compromises large and small I'd made to keep Michael safe and fed. "That still doesn't explain your interest in me," I said, "or why you've inserted yourself into my life." Alexander's expression softened. "When I first heard you sing, something resonated. A familiar pain, transformed into something beautiful. I wanted to understand it. Then I wanted to ease it." He shrugged, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture, "and then I simply wanted to be near it. Near you. I'm a single mother working 2 jobs to make rent," I said bluntly. "You're—" I gestured vaguely at him, encompassing the expensive suit, the power, the dangerous past. "A man who recognizes rare things when he finds them," he finished for me. "A man who knows the value of family, loyalty, protection." "I don't need protection," I said automatically. His eyebrow rose. "No? Your ex-husband returned to the city yesterday. Today he left again, rather hastily, from what I understand." Ice slid down my spine. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Alexander said, raising his hands. "I merely suggested to James Hayes that his continued presence in the city might prove uncomfortable for all involved, particularly given the substantial backchild support he owes." "You threatened him," I translated. "I reminded him of his legal obligations," Alexander corrected. "He seemed eager to return to Miami. I should have been outraged at his interference. Instead, I felt a treacherous sense of relief. James was gone again, but this time by choice, with no more power to hurt us. What happens now?" I asked quietly. "That depends on you, Eleanor." Alexander's voice was equally soft. "I would like to continue our arrangement here. I would like to take you and Michael to dinner this weekend. Beyond that, whatever you're comfortable with, and if I say no to all of it, if I walk away—" His eyes held mine steadily. "Then you walk away, with a considerable final payment, and no interference from me. Though I would hope you'd keep the pendant, at least. A reminder that not all men abandon their responsibilities." It was the perfect answer, a clean escape offered freely. So why did the thought of it leave me hollow? "I need time," I said finally. "To think about what's best for Michael. For us." Alexander nodded. "Of course." He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "Tonight's payment, as agreed." I took it, no longer uncomfortable with the transaction. It was honest, at least. Clearer than the emotional currents swirling beneath our conversation. "Will you at least consider Sunday dinner?" he asked as I stood to leave. "My father would be disappointed to miss the opportunity to spoil a child. It's been too long since there were children in our family home." I thought of Michael, his excitement at the Bentley ride, his easy rapport with Alexander. I thought of Victor's kind eyes, so like his son's. "I'll think about it," I promised. As I left the Crimson Room, I realized I was still wearing the microphone pendant. Somehow, it no longer felt like a gift from a stranger, but a connection to a story I was only beginning to understand. Sunday morning dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight filtering through our apartment windows as I helped Michael button his best shirt, a navy blue one bought on clearance last Christmas. "Is Alexander's house big?" Michael asked, vibrating with excitement. "Does he have a swimming pool? A dog?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered truthfully. "We'll find out together." After much deliberation, I had texted Alexander yesterday accepting his dinner invitation. His response had been simple: "We look forward to it. Car will collect you at noon." Now, as the clock approached 12, I checked my reflection one last time. I'd splurged on a new dress. Nothing fancy, just a simple burgundy wrap style that flattered my figure without being provocative. The silver microphone pendant gleamed at my throat, now a familiar weight. "You look pretty, Mom," Michael said, watching me apply a touch of lipstick. "Thank you, baby." I smiled at him in the mirror. "You look very handsome yourself." A text alert chimed on my phone. Car waiting outside. I expected the Bentley, but instead found a more understated black SUV, though still clearly luxury class. The same stone-faced bodyguard held the door open for us. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hayes, young Mr. Hayes," he said with a slight nod. "I'm Nikolai. Mr. Vronsky sends his apologies that he couldn't collect you personally. He's attending to his father." Michael climbed in eagerly, immediately discovering that the SUV had a built-in entertainment system. While he explored the children's movies available, I turned to Nikolai. "Is Mr. Vronsky's father unwell?" Something like approval flickered in Nikolai's eyes at my question. "Just the usual challenges of age, ma'am. Nothing serious today." The drive took us out of the city, through increasingly affluent suburbs, and finally up a winding road into the hills overlooking the bay. Iron gates opened automatically as we approached, revealing a sweeping driveway that led to a stone mansion nestled among ancient oak trees. "Wow," Michael breathed, his face pressed to the window. "It looks like a castle." It did resemble something from a European fairy tale, with its gray stone walls, peaked roofs, and circular turret at one corner. Gardens stretched in every direction, brilliant with autumn colors. Nikolai parked before massive wooden doors that opened as we approached. Alexander stood in the entrance, more casually dressed than I'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes appear even more intensely blue. "Welcome," he said, his gaze moving between us, lingering slightly longer on me. I hope the drive was pleasant. "Your house is awesome," Michael declared, bouncing on his toes as he looked around the soaring entrance hall with its crystal chandelier and sweeping staircase. Alexander smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. "Thank you, Michael. Would you like a tour before lunch?" "Yes, please." Michael looked up at me for permission. "Go ahead," I said, amused by his enthusiasm. "Just be careful not to touch anything." "Actually," Alexander said, crouching to Michael's level, "there's someone who's been very excited to meet you. He's in the garden." He pointed through an open doorway to the terrace beyond. "His name is Czar." "Is that your butler?" Michael asked, making Alexander laugh. "No, Czar is my dog, a Caucasian shepherd. He's very gentle with children, but quite large. Would you like to meet him?" Michael was already racing toward the doors, only to skid to a halt and turn back. "Can I, Mom? Please?" "Yes, but remember to let him sniff your hand first," I called as he disappeared onto the terrace. "He'll be perfectly safe," Alexander assured me, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne, that same woodsy, masculine scent. Nikolai is watching from the terrace, and Czar was trained as a therapy dog before I adopted him. A former mobster with a therapy dog? I couldn't help but smile. "You're full of contradictions, Alexander Vronsky." "Life rarely fits into neat categories," he replied, offering his arm. "Shall we join them?" My father is resting before lunch, but he's looking forward to meeting Michael. I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand on his arm. Through the fine wool of his sweater, I could feel the solid strength of him, the controlled power in his frame. We stepped onto a stone terrace overlooking formal gardens that gave way to wilder woodlands beyond. Michael was kneeling beside what could only be described as a small bear, a massive gray dog with thick fur and intelligent eyes who was patiently allowing my son to stroke his enormous head. "He's so fluffy," Michael exclaimed as we approached, "and his paws are bigger than my whole hand." Czar was bred to guard livestock against wolves and bears in the Caucasus Mountains, Alexander explained. His ancestors have been protecting families for thousands of years. Something about the way he said it made me wonder if we were still talking about the dog. Lunch was served in a sunlit conservatory, filled with tropical plants. The food was simple but exquisite. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, salads bursting with color. Michael ate with surprising enthusiasm, especially when Alexander taught him how to dip bread in olive oil, the Italian way. After the meal, Victor joined us, moving slowly with his cane, but his eyes bright with interest. He took to Michael immediately, producing a carved wooden chess set and teaching him the basics of the game, while Alexander gave me a tour of the main floor of the house. "This has been in my family for 3 generations, he explained, as we walked through a library lined with leather-bound books. "My grandfather purchased it when he immigrated in the 1950s. It was nearly derelict then." "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "It feels lived in, not like a showpiece." "That's important to me," he said, stopping before a wall of family photographs. Growing up in that single room, all I wanted was space, but as I acquired properties, I discovered most large houses feel empty. impersonal. This one has always been different. I studied the photos. Alexander as a serious-faced teen beside a young girl I assumed was his sister. Victor in his prime with a beautiful dark-haired woman who must be Natalia. More recent images of family gatherings. "Where is your sister now?" I asked. "Anna lives in Vienna with her husband and their twins. She's a concert violinist." Pride warmed his voice. "She was always the talented one. You saved her," I said quietly, "when you were 12. His eyes met mine, something vulnerable flashing in their depths. "We protect our own, Eleanor. It's the only rule that matters in the end." Later, as afternoon stretched toward evening, Michael fell asleep on a couch in the library, exhausted from excitement and the fresh air he'd gotten playing with Czar in the gardens. I covered him with a throw blanket, then found Alexander and Victor on the terrace, speaking quietly in Russian. They switched to English as I approached, Victor gesturing for me to join them. "Your boy is magnificent," he told me, his expression warm. "Bright, curious, well-mannered. You have done an excellent job, raising him alone." "Thank you," I said, unexpectedly touched by his praise. "It hasn't been easy, but he's worth every struggle. Children always are." Victor nodded. "You know, Alexander was also raised without his father for many years." Alexander shot his father a warning look, which Victor ignored. "I was imprisoned for a time," Victor continued, watching me carefully. "Political disagreements with the Soviet regime. Alexander was 8 when I was taken, 13 when I was released. His mother kept them alive through impossible circumstances." I glanced at Alexander, understanding more pieces of his story. The sacrifice his father had been forced to make when the Bratva came. The years of separation. The determination to build something legitimate from the ruins of a shattered childhood. "You have your mother's strength," Victor told him, patting his hand. "And her heart, though you hide it well." Alexander said something soft in Russian that made Victor smile and rise laboriously to his feet. "I will check on young Michael and then rest before dinner," he announced. "You two, enjoy the sunset. It is spectacular from the western terrace." After he departed, Alexander led me to a smaller terrace that faced the setting sun. The vista was breathtaking, rolling hills in autumn splendor, the distant shimmer of the bay, and the sky painted in fiery orange and deep purple. We stood in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the sun sink lower. "Your father adores you," I observed finally. "The feeling is mutual," Alexander replied. "He sacrificed everything for us. His career, his freedom, years of his life. When we came to America, he was a broken man physically, but never in spirit." "And your mother? What happened to her?" Pain shadowed his face. "Cancer, when I was 25. She lived to see me successful, but not entirely legitimate. It was her dying wish that I find a different path." "And have you?" I asked softly. "I'm trying," he said, his voice equally quiet. "Some debts can never be fully repaid. Some wounds never completely heal, but I'm building something better, something that doesn't require the same compromises." He turned to face me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. "Eleanor, I know this is unorthodox, my interest in you, in Michael. My past is complicated, parts of it dark. I understand if that makes you hesitant." "It should," I admitted. "Everything about you should send me running. And yet, he prompted when I didn't continue. "And yet I feel safer with you than I have in years," I confessed. Seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. He stepped closer, his hand rising to touch the pendant at my throat. "My mother wore this the night she met my father. She always said it brought her to the great love of her life." "Alexander," I whispered, not pulling away. "What is this between us? What are you offering?" "Protection," he said immediately. "Security for you and Michael, a life where you don't have to work yourself to exhaustion just to survive." "In exchange for what?" His eyes held mine steadily. "Your presence in my life, your voice, your honesty. Nothing more than you're willing to give, Eleanor." "And if that's not enough? If you decide you want more than I can offer?" "Then we renegotiate," he said simply. "Or you walk away, no strings attached. I meant what I said before. I would never hold you against your will. I believed him, despite every reason not to. Michael comes first, I said firmly. Always. I would expect nothing less. He hesitated, then added, My father wasn't the only one impressed today. Michael is an extraordinary boy. He deserves every opportunity life can offer. The sun touched the horizon, bathing us in golden light. Alexander's hand moved from the pendant to my cheek, a touch so gentle it barely registered. May I? He asked, his voice deep. I answered by closing the distance between us, my lips finding his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened. His arms encircled me, strong and secure, as the last rays of sun warmed our entwined figures. When we finally parted, both slightly breathless, I rested my forehead against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. I'm still afraid, I admitted, of what this means, of relying on someone again. Fear is wisdom in the face of danger, he said, stroking my hair. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but Eleanor, he tilted my chin up to meet his gaze. I am not James. I don't make promises lightly, and I never abandon what's mine. I'm not yours, I reminded him. Even as I remained in his embrace, he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. Not yet. But I'm a patient man. From inside the house came the sound of a door opening, followed by Michael's voice calling for me. Alexander released me reluctantly. We should go back inside, he said. Dinner will be ready soon. My father has instructed the cook to make his famous pierogi. As we walked back toward the house, his hand found mine, fingers interlacing naturally. At the terrace doors, I paused. One day at a time, I said. A condition rather than a promise. He nodded, accepting my terms. One day at a time. Inside, Michael was sitting at the chessboard with Victor. Czar stretched out at their feet. My son's face lit up as we entered, hand in hand. Mom, I learned chess, and Mr. Victor says I can come back next weekend for more lessons. Can we? I looked from my son's hopeful face to Victor's gentle smile, to Alexander's patient eyes, and felt something long frozen inside me begin to thaw. Yes, I said, squeezing Alexander's hand. We can come back. As the night deepened around the warmly lit house, as we gathered around the table like the family we might become, I realized that sometimes safety comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes the most dangerous choice and the right choice are one and